Welcome to The How of Business with your host, Henry Lopez, the podcast that helps you start, run, and grow your small business. And now, here is your host.
Welcome to this episode of The How of Business. This is Henry Lopez, and my friend and return guest, John Humphrey, is with me today. John, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, Henry.
Looking forward to it. We're going to chat a bit more about what John has ended up specializing in quite a number of years now. He'll bring us up to date. In particular, he's written a book that recently he updated. He's in the process of writing a new book, but essentially it's all under the title of Connect for Life. It's more than just networking. It's how do we actually build and nurture and leverage those connections, in particular in the business world, to generate revenues and opportunities. And so we're going to dive into that. And in particular, we're going to take a focus of how it applies to, this is knowledge that anybody can learn from, but how it applies to those owner-led, founder-led service companies where you have that challenge of those cycles, right? You get busy, you generate a bunch of business, and then you deliver. And that's that constant challenge that small businesses, in particular services company, that's a particular focus for John. And so we're going to explore that amongst other things. To get more information about the How of Business, including the show notes page for this episode, just visit thehowofbusiness.com. That's where you can also find information about my one-on-one and group coaching programs. And wherever you're listening to this episode, I encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. Now, let me tell you a bit more about John. John Humphrey is a serial entrepreneur with experience in starting businesses ranging from restaurants, which I didn't remember that, John. Restaurants to software and consulting. John currently serves as a chief connector of Connect for Life. And Connect for Life focuses on founder-led companies, typically ranging from about 5 to 30 million in revenues who desire to grow. And they do this by focusing on the technical leaders of those companies and teach them how to grow their respective books of business. John has spent a career building companies and assisting clients in building transitional solutions across the enterprise. Yeah. John believes that we are the most network yet least connected individuals in a generation. And success in life is directly related to the depth and breadth of our relationships and our desire to help others. John's previous appearance on the podcast, so he's been on the show before, was episode 385. And in that episode, we did a direct deep dive on Connect for Life, the book in particular, and also his journey. So if you're interested in his very inspirational journey, as I mentioned, with restaurants, a very varied background. And also we went into a little bit more detail on how he and I met. I'll do an update on that for those of you who have not listened to that episode. But that's episode 385. Listen to that episode if you want to learn more about John's very interesting journey. John lives in the Dallas, Texas area. And so once again, John, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here.
So for those of you who may not have listened to it, or it's been a while, John and I have known each other now. We're going to be dating ourselves here, but what year was it that we first met, John? It would have been mid-90s?
95.
Right, at Lawson, right?
Yep.
At Lawson. I was at Lawson Software already, and then John joined as a salesperson and then had a successful career there and other places. And then we crossed paths at Ariba as well, right?
Yes, we did. We worked together for almost a year, I think.
That's what I thought. Yeah, gosh.
Yeah.
It's starting to become fuzzy.
Yeah. Well, I walk into the wrong rooms all the time, wonder why I'm there.
Our mutual friend, Mark Brady, and I will often revisit those days and the great successes and fun we had at Lawson. I may have mentioned this on our previous interview, but when people ask me, what do you miss about those times? It's two simple things. One is working with highly intelligent and talented people like you and Mark and others. And then being on stage. I miss that sometimes of, when you're on it, and you're doing well in front of an audience and you're connecting, there's something about that feels good.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story before we get going is when I started Pariveda in 2003, one of the things we implemented during the interview process was that candidates would have to stand on their feet and do a case, work a case problem and whiteboard it.
Wow.
And the inspiration of that came from two places. The first was I went to school in Oxford to get my second degree at SMU, and the professors, the whole test was oral.
Wow.
And so this scared the crap out of you. So you sort of knew the men from the boys. And then I always considered you the master of the whiteboard. You would practice for hours and were really good at taking a very complex technical story and graphing out the pieces and parts. And if you could look at my board here over to the left, I've just done that for another client. So
That's fantastic.
whiteboarding is a great skill.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Mark Brady really was helped me tremendously with that, and he was a master of it as well. And where that comes from is we learned that while we certainly used PowerPoint where it was appropriate, we learned early on that we tend to hide behind our presentation, be it PowerPoint or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, which is partly where you go here in a moment with Connect for Life, is people buy from people buy from people they trust, right?
Mm-hmm. It hadn't changed.
It hasn't changed, and it's not going to change, right? Especially as you allude to it in our connected yet not very connected world that we live in. That's still the way it happens. And especially if we're asking people for large sums of money to invest in us, it happens by making a connection. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I always thought is, so when I do my slide deck, I have to turn down the lights typically so that people could see the screen. This is back in the days of those poor overhead projectors, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That didn't quite have enough power, so you had to dim the lights. And I thought, well, nobody can see me. I'm the one I want them to look at, right? So it was ego driven, but it worked. But the thing is, then when you're on the whiteboard, the value of it is that the prospective client, arrives at the solution with you, ideally, when you do it well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's the power of storytelling.
That's right.
I mean, you're just telling a visual story on a whiteboard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they're crafting it with you, and that's powerful. All right, Connect for Life, Network Your Personal Brand and Win is the title of the book. The book's been out for a while, but you recently did what is it called? A new edition or an updated edition?
I did.
Correct?
Yeah. Second edition.
Why?
So why did I do that? Yeah. So great question. I started that company in 2003, Party Beta Solutions. We grew it for a decade. I had lots of notes. I probably had written the book 2 or 3 times, just in various formats. And then I left after a decade, sold my interest, and still very good friends with all the people. Bruce and I, my co-founder and I, we still get together every year. And now they're 20 plus years into the deal. He just retired as the CEO, and they still don't have any commissioned salespeople. Probably 1,500 employees, 150, 160 million in revenue. And I realized, oh, this is the real thing. So I went back and I started really looking at, we tracked these. I used to call them touch points. Now I call them connect points. And we tracked over 15 different things across 3 categories of connecting, marketing, and selling. And as I started thinking about a software product, I realized that, if you go back to like the James Clear Atomic Habits, it's make it simple. I wasn't making it simple. And so I took that down to 9 things. So 3 categories of 3 that pretty much everybody can remember, and variety of point totals for each one of those points, and rewrote a big section of the book around connect points and the software, and re-released it almost a year ago.
So thanks for that update. Explain though now a little bit more, what do we mean by connect points?
So this actually started, you may not remember this, but I started doing this back when Matt Olson and I were at Lawson, and we'd sit around on a Friday afternoon with our shoes off and our feet up on the desk, when Michael Fox would walk around and say, doesn't anybody wear shoes around here anymore? And we started thinking, how do we develop activity above the funnel? What is it that leads to a sales qualified lead as opposed to a marketing qualified lead?
Right.
And so we started, even back then, it was writing content. It was attending events. It was reaching out to old colleagues. It was pinging your network. It was going to lunch with somebody. And we created this little contest called the Big Dog Contest.
I remember that.
And, if you want to run with the big dogs, you got to get off the porch. And we would keep track of points every week. And whoever won, the other guy would buy lunch or a round of golf or whatever on a Friday afternoon. And so, you want a hat or you want a t-shirt. And it was this game that we played. And, fast forward, I think a year later, we were both like two of the top guys in the company outside of the healthcare group. And so when I started Party, and then I got into managing people,
Right.
and so by the time we got to Pari Veda, from 95 to 2003, I was kind of tired of salespeople. And I said to Bruce, I said, I want to do this without salespeople. I want to teach everybody in the company the most valuable activities to do around connecting, marketing, and selling. And so I can unpack that a little bit, but that's
well, I remember clearly back then you waited. The starting point was an inbound RFP, right? Or maybe you had a connection with the big six or big eight, whatever it was back then, knowing that there was one coming down the line and maybe you could influence it. But that's certainly where the funnel would start for most of us, right?
Yeah, and you only knew about it if you were going to lunch with guys and finding out who they were engaged with, and they were early days, and it may be a software selection, or maybe it won't be. And you spread a really wide net. And the other thing that I did is I walked around. I had a book of every major company over $500 million in Dallas, and I created this network of non-competitive technology providers. So a hardware guy, a software guy, a network person, this is way before cloud. And so I had probably 15 or 20 different technology folks. That led to me starting the DFW IT Roundtable with Matt Rosen and, oh my gosh, Dave Casey and a few other guys.
Yeah, I think I had a chance to come in and present to you guys one time, if I recall correctly.
And that group still meets.
Is that right?
It's not all the same members, but it's still non-competitive A players to try to be, 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from an introduction at a major company. And so that was the thing I always admired about you, is you were so, as I call it, was not my term, but consciously competent from very early on, right? I had the privilege of working with really bright and talented salespeople, but not everybody knows why they're good. And hence, that's why the classic problem of a good salesperson doesn't necessarily make a good sales manager, because they don't know how to teach others how to do that, right? That's true. Yeah, that's true. Right. But, so that this whole theme is really where I got to the founder thing, because what I realized is that it's the same thing you realize about a lot of A sales guys. We certainly worked between Lawson and Ariba. I think we probably worked with some of the finest people in the world.
Agreed.
And none of them were schleps, right? They didn't have a shtick. They just really cared about solving problems. And it was like, oh, well, so if I can make friends and solve problems, then if I have a process and teach people a procedure, then you're not born a business development person. You can be made into one, just like, I might never go to the Olympics, but, I can certainly get better. And so I started studying what happens to these founder-led businesses, particularly in IT services and scientific services and anything that's a technical service, as they largely build something on their own backs, and they get to some level, I call it the founder ceiling, and they get stuck. And some of them get stuck at 5 million and some of them get stuck at 30. But when they try to start growing, they don't have a system or a process to do it. And they don't know how to manage a sales team.
Right.
And they're not really sure what they do every day when they wake up that leads to success. So I sort of wove a golden thread through all that in the book, Connect for Life. The first half is really about why, how to measure it, and what to do. And then the second half is more about how to really run a successful services company, how to get meetings and how to, look at the business and manage it week to week. And so now I'm all sort of kind of crazy about just helping introverts in general.
Yeah. So an immediate thing that comes to mind, if I didn't know about this approach to connecting versus traditional networking, is, well, that's going to take a long time for that to develop, John, right? Isn't it going to take some time for me to develop these relationships? And in the meantime, either A, I don't have time for that, or B, what do I do in the interim? So what do you say if you get that pushback to founders?
I mean, the answer is yes, you're right. It takes longer to develop people than it goes to hire a gun and say, go get me some meaningful meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But what people don't tell you about a commercial sales operation, even if it's a hybrid, you have seller doers and commercial salespeople, is your turnover rate is good if it's only 25% a year of your staff. So you're always hiring, you're
Right.
always firing. You've got the 80-20 rule where, those 20% of those sales rep generate 80% of your revenue. And then they're always trolling for the next big thing, right?
Yeah.
We know that, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
somebody comes with a bigger carrot, you go, hey, that looks pretty good.
Yep.
Whereas if you invest in your younger technicians and you teach them these skills, first of all, these are the skills that they should be learning in life. And they get better and better and better. That loyalty quotient actually goes up and your turnover goes down because now they have a career path. They don't have to sort of justify why being a delivery person ought to be enough because they have the whole package. And as you know, the person with the whole package makes the most money. They get to be in the club, the partner club, the VP club. And that's what, as a consultant, that's sort of your goal, right?
Yeah. When you say technician, we're talking about, that's a general term that you use for the person that delivers the service, that implements, that gets out there and does the work. Is that right?
A knowledge worker, somebody who has studied very hard, accumulated a knowledge that somebody's willing to pay for.
This is Henry Lopez, briefly pausing this episode to invite you to schedule a free coaching consultation with me. I welcome the opportunity to chat with you about your business plans and offer the guidance and accountability that we all need to achieve success. As an experienced small business owner myself, I understand the challenges you're experiencing, and often it's about helping you ask the right questions to help you make progress towards achieving your goals. Whether it's getting started with your first business or growing and maybe exiting your existing small business, I can help you get there. To find out more about my business coaching services and to schedule your free coaching consultation, please visit thehowofbusiness.com. Take that next step today towards finally realizing your business ownership dreams. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Often, though, to your point, and I want to explore this because it's also why the founders often, they look at sales as that four-letter word, right? As that thing that I don't do that. I only deal with what's real and what it does and what it doesn't. Sales is about embellishing. And so how do you feel this approach helps people embrace this?
Well, I lead with the unsales approach. I'm teaching people how to outlove their network, to always be available to serve it, to generate, to sort of, if you think about it, right? So connect is nurture your network, reach out to people, touch them, have meetings with them, go to events. The marketing is really about creating. It's about creating content, writing, commenting on somebody else's, speaking somewhere. I call it creating a collision so that the people that are looking for that knowledge run into the people that have it. And then the selling is about developing business through a very proven, I've been using the same sales methodology for more than 30 years, and it's a working activity-based, do these things, you're ready to move to the next stage. And most technicians have never had a marketing class. They're a lawyer, or they're a software developer, or they're an architect, or all they do is quality assurance, and they don't name marketing or sales from Adam. And so I bring the skills to them. And so even if they're doing account management and they're farming, not hunting.
Yep.
These skills make them better at that.
Absolutely.
And then they realize I'm not trying to manipulate anybody into anything. I'm looking for problems. I'm looking for pain. Back in the day, we used to look for latent pain. We'd turn that into pain and we'd create a vision of a solution that our software would solve. We do the same thing with services. And so, the most rewarding time for me is that aha moment that somebody finally goes, "Oh, you're just asking me to be a human." I
Right.
don't have to do anything special. I just have to do enough of the right
And
activity.
help people solve problems, help connect
people solve
people to
problems.
help them solve problems.
And that you're a scientist, isn't that what you like to do? Yes, I love to solve problems. They like the elegance of it, and so that's once that, it's amazing what happens when somebody finally goes, "Oh," it's like, I'm gonna cheat. You asked me about my favorite book, and the one I'm telling everybody about is the Go Giver book, which is about being a helper, being a giver, putting yourself out there. You find out Henry's going to Europe and you say, "Well, I went to these 3 places, you ought to go." Or, your kid needs a tutor, or you need a job, or if you're just the person out there that is in the way helping, people will remember you.
Yeah.
And I found that the social side reminds people that I do know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So a lot of that collision happens because they forget about you.
I see. And so that's the part of putting ourselves out there in the right way so that those collisions can happen. And then methodically helping people, connecting people. And eventually, and over time, they see you as that person and they'll come to you. And then as it happens is they'll come to you eventually when they need something that you can directly offer or your company can offer. Yes.
Correct.
But it does require, though, John, and this is the other thing that's a challenge for technicians or even for founders who are doers, is I can get lost in the doing. I can get lost in the delivery, and that's all I want to do. And maybe I surface every couple months, but I get lost on it. So part of it is a discipline to do this as a weekly practice, right? But so how do you address that component of it?
That's the hardest part is I have to sort of find out what their dream is. It's like Simon Sinek's Begin with Why. Like, why are you doing this? Because if you just want to be a technician and sit in the closet with the green shade on and we'll slide a pizza under the door, you can do that, but you're going to be limited on the upside of what you can do for your family and for yourself.
Right.
And it's just a very factual conversation,
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you want to advance your career, you got to go do what the people do that advance their careers. And so once I make it a non-threatening thing, what I have found is that the Connect Points tool that allows me to set goals, measure the progress, and it gamifies it. It's almost like what Matt and I created all those years ago. It's the intersection. A friend of mine described it the other day. I thought this was great. He says your tool is the glue between the Go Givers book, the Never Eat Alone book, and the Atomic Habit book. And once you've mastered putting those 3 concepts together, you have this beautiful measurement tool that sort of gives you a dopamine hit every time you
well,
do
like
something.
you did early days. It gamifies it, right? And
Yes.
so we all respond to that.
Yes.
It's okay as an individual contributor to say, that's okay, that's not for me, I'll stay in my closet and code away. It's not okay as the founder or a senior person within a small organization. Right? We have to understand that there is a way to do sales without it being manipulative, without it being completely outside of our comfort zone. There is a way to do it this way by connecting and providing people a service and helping people and connecting people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You lay out kind of in a book, in the new version, you kind of bring together and this new enhanced model that you call Connect, Market, Sell, which is what we've been talking about. But walk me through that model at a high level and put it all together. The Connect, Market, Sell, you have the 3 interconnecting circles that describe this visually.
Yeah. So connecting has 3 items in it. Message somebody. So that's an email, a text on LinkedIn, whatever. Meet, which is any kind of meeting, virtual, physical. It's just encouraged to get out there. Don't forget about the people in your network. Most of us lose track of the people that we went to college with, and yet we went to colleges where very accomplished people are out there doing very amazing things. And, you
Right.
see them at a reunion. So I encourage people to go back and look at these people that you've lost in your
Mhm.
career. And then the last category is attending some kind of an event. It can be a virtual event, it can be a physical event. I have my own little handicap on how I handle physical networking events because I'm not a huge fan of big crowds and
Right.
in big buildings. And so I look for the kind eyes around the periphery of the buildings, the guys and gals that went because somebody told them they had to,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
they just really can't wait till it's over.
Yeah, because as introverts, that drains us. Those activities drain us, right? Or can
Right.
drain us.
So I just look, if I can have 3 to 5 meaningful conversations with somebody in a couple of hour event, man, it's a win for me.
That's the way I do it, because as an
Yep.
introvert, I go to these events and I say, okay, my goal is I just want to meet 2 new people, somebody I've
That's
never
it.
met before. And that's my goal. And if
And
I
it's a
accomplish
15
that,
minute. It's like, how
exactly.
you doing? Why are you
Exactly.
here? It's like
Yeah.
a really getting to know you thing.
That's right. And then what I do for myself in some of these events is I give myself permission that if I want to leave, I leave. And just that release of that pressure, I find that I often end up staying, but I didn't go into it with this unrealistic expectation for myself.
Well, you get 3 points in our model, for attending an event. So 1 for a message, 2 for a meeting.
Right. So message, meet, attend is part of that first circle of connect.
Yep. And then the next is marketing, and in that world, it's really about writing, commenting. I teach people that you've got to write comments to posts that are at least 12 to 14 words. You can't just say, hey, that's awesome, and give a thumbs up.
Yeah.
You want the algorithms to know that you added value to that. So a lot of times it's, hey, that's a really good point. I read something, something, something. Here's a reference to another article that supports your position. Nice work. Appreciate you. That's a gift. That's in the out love thing. You're just giving them a gift. There's no real intrinsic value for you except the habit. And then writing a post, learning how to write in LinkedIn is very different than writing, a white paper.
But what's one common, we'll call it not a mistake, but just one common thing that you see people that are not learning about that? What's one common thing?
There's a thing in LinkedIn called an article. You can write an article and the algorithm doesn't even look at it. So you have to write a post. You have, 3 lines to get somebody to read more. When I click on that more button, that creates the impression, right? And then, you keep things to easy prime numbers. 3, the 3 reasons for, the 5 reasons for. You tell them what you're going to tell them. You tell them, and then you tell them what you told them, right?
I've heard
speech.
That before.
Yeah, we learned that in speech, like 101.
Right.
And then speaking, obviously, is the thing that terrifies most people.
Right.
I think you have to. So the great thing about the consulting and the services business is there's plenty of opportunities to speak in friendly environments, right?
Yeah.
If you think about a stand-up meeting or a status meeting or anybody that gets into that manager principal level in a consulting firm, they're having to interact with, pretty serious executives every week. So they get that down, and then you can really buy your way into a conference around a domain that you're very comfortable with. So I'm not just going onto the street corner and talking about, Microsoft Azure versus AWS. I'm talking about something, if you were really deep on ag tech, you would try to go speak at the ag tech conference and get famous, get known, and then you get asked back.
Yeah.
And it gains momentum. So that's
you're positioning yourself as an authority there. It could even be nowadays a podcast appearance, right? Which is much more comfortable for a lot of people because I don't see the audience out there looking at me, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So that's marketing, writing.
So that's marketing. It's creating
and primarily that platform, other than the speaking, for most of us in B2B is LinkedIn right now. Yes.
Right now. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Gartner put out an article a couple of years ago, maybe 18 months, and it said that 89% of buyers of services do all of this research online before they ever engage somebody from the company.
Yep.
So if you remember the old days where we
So
sort of
different.
showed up and show up and throw up, I got to tell you who we are and why, blah, blah, blah. They know all that.
They know all that. Yep.
They've been in your LinkedIn.
They know all that and more. Yeah.
They've looked for somebody who knows you. They've probably done a few reference calls on you, right? So this ought to be good news for an introvert, because most introverts like creating content and they like being famous for content, and they love the detail of,
Right.
Now they have to learn how to articulate it in a way that
Sure.
is manageable. So,
but they like getting to the point. So the unnecessary fluff and embellishment, doesn't work anyway. So you don't have to do that part of it.
No, you don't. In fact, and what's even better about this whole seller doer idea is that buyers want to talk to the knowledge worker.
Yes, that's a good point.
And so if you're a salesperson and you want to use this model, you better be very deep in the domain. Yep. You better be a Mark Brady and be able to get up on a whiteboard and draw the architecture of the Ariba, purchasing system.
You can no longer just be marshaling resources or distributing brochures, right?
No.
Otherwise, the buyer's going to see right through that and see you as nothing but an impediment, not a facilitator of any kind.
And for most of my technical founders that I'm talking about, this is like music to their ears. They're like, "Oh, good, I didn't want to deal with a salesperson, Salesforce anyway. Exactly. I hate salespeople."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, then the last circle is selling.
It's the things that you would expect, right? So there's 3 types of meetings that we track. The first would be discovery meetings. That's usually a couple of points. And you might have lots of discovery meetings, 1, 2, 5, 10. You're trying in discovery, what I teach is you're trying to not only get the requirements to deliver a statement of work, but you're trying to map the organization and figure out the formal and informal power and figure out how to get a coach and who's got the juice and whose budget is it, and is it a guppy in the shark chart or a great white? So all of that happens in discovery. So, you get a couple of points for every one of those meetings, and that's where your delivery guys really participate in that. Because if you're worth your salt, you're taking those guys with you because they're at the account every day. Second is proposals. I call them, I always lead with a pre-proposal. It's a methodology that I've learned to use, 20 years ago, where we sort of go through our understanding of the problem, our approach of how we would solve the problem, the value proposition of solving that problem, and then some estimated fees. And then I usually have an appendix that's sort of, here's the background on the company or me. And the reason that's important is that you tell the prospect no new information. By the time you get a statement of work, no new information. Everything is in this pre-proposal, and they just sort of emotionally adopt it. And then it sells while it's sitting on their desk in their office. And then obviously the last would be some kind of a closing meeting.
Right.
And I say meeting with power, because you don't know who has power anymore. The C's push it down to their directors for accountability. And so, that's, and every one of these scores is really an interpretation, right?
Sure.
And so the 11th commandment, Zig Ziglar used to always say, is thou shalt not kid thyself. So that's the honor system. It's you.
Yeah. Don't lie to yourself. What do you have to gain? But this helps us to, again, the as I call it, the gamification of it helps us to focus on it. And if we just do these activities repeatedly, conscientiously, with the right motivation, it pays off, obviously. All right. We've talked about the revised book. You've got a new book that you're working on now as well. Yes.
Yep. It's going to be all around connect points and this idea of glue, of bringing the giving and the creating of content and the developing of business into this cohesive story that's written just for introverts. I'm trying to use, you remember the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's not an introvert I say that to that goes, "Oh yeah, one of my favorite books." The answer is 42.
That is interesting how that's
and so I'm gonna try some riff on that. And it's not going to be a long book, but it's going to be sort of, here's the how-to. It's going to be all about that. Like, I'll probably review those 3 books I talked about. I'll probably talk about the profile of successful people who've done that, and then I'll do a really deep dive on why these 9 things are so important. And then, in the tracking, setting a weekly goal, If you don't have a weekly goal, you're kidding yourself. Entering what you put in there, tracking it against your peers and your colleagues, so you have a little bit of competition. And it's just to, people have bad weeks, and so they need to know that next week they can start over, forgive themselves, and move on. And then the poking somebody and giving them an attaboy or a fist pump and challenging them to next week. Hey, why don't we try to see if we can get 60 points next week? And
Yeah, and this also serves the Connect Points tool and software also serves that the incredible power of measuring something, of putting something up on the board, and that really just works as a motivator for us.
And just like you, that'll lead to probably group forums. There's a feature that I'm going to build that you can opt in to a group.
I see.
And people that you don't know will hold you accountable every week, which I think is kind of a cool
accountability is
cool thing. And then have that sort of bat phone call where you get on the phone for 30 minutes and there's half a dozen guys and gals sharing what's working, what's not working, what they're struggling with, ideas.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to wrap it up with this question, kind of a combined question, because I always want to know, where do I start? But if I am listening and I am one of those founder-led service companies in particular, or really any business that's struggling with this part of the sales side of things, what's one thing you want them to take away from this conversation we had about how to improve that?
Well, it's not complicated. It's the way you would want to be treated if you were in somebody else's network, and that it is teachable. You can teach this program to introverts, to deeply technical people that have had an aversion to selling because it's really not selling.
And where should they start? Should they read the book first, or what do they want? Where do they start?
You can find me on LinkedIn, but the best place is to go theconnectpoints.com. If you go to theconnectpoints.com, we have a download that I call a Net Connector Score that they get for free. And it explains all of the points in great detail and how much we score, what's a 1-pointer versus a 5-pointer. And then it actually gives them a tool to set, like, say, I want to sell $2.5 million next year. It will use all of our historical data to say, well, then you need to do 139 points a week or 75 points a week. And you ought to break that down between connecting, 40 and 20 marketing and 10 selling, or it's pretty nifty. And it gives you a kind of a roadmap on how much work is enough work. And we're also going to be having a download that's a spreadsheet if you don't want to use the product. So we're just really out there trying to help introverts be successful.
And it speaks to what you said earlier, which is it helps me now to quantify that before the above the funnel, right? What are those then connection type activities that I need to do that'll result in these opportunities to achieve that goal that I have financially?
Happens to me all the time. I'll look back a week or two and I'll go, golly, I don't have any selling points. Mm-hmm. And then I realize, oh, there's 3 people I haven't followed up with because I've been busy. So you get to manage yourself. And, if you're committed to doing the work, this thing works.
Yeah. And I think you touched on something there that is a takeaway for me as well, which has always been the case, is I think it's because at the end of the day, for some people, we think sales is kind of like, oh, I'll get to it. It's necessary, but it's not what I got to take care of this customer problem right now. But we've got to realize that we've got to be around to be able to help people solve problems, right? We got to look for that next opportunity. And so it's a balancing act on a weekly basis to do a little bit of both. Again, some weeks, like you said, get away from us, but that's the help us, the focus to get back on track. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's nothing worse as a founder of a company who's worked very hard to build a reputation. And, let's say they've gotten 100 people and they wake up one day and they realize they don't have a pipeline.
Yeah.
And they know that just by nature, you're going to attrit 25 to 30% of their client base every year. And no matter how good they do their job, they're going to lose clients and they're going to need new ones. And, when they have to cut people, it's cutting bone. Or they're so committed to the culture that they're spending retained earnings, which is tomorrow's capital, to keep people busy who aren't billable.
Yeah. And that's why they get stuck in that chasm, and they can't seem to, despite what all efforts, they can't get to that next level.
Right.
Tell us again where to go to learn more.
The Connect Points, TheConnectPoints.com. And everything, we're putting everything on that site right now.
Excellent. I'll have a link to it as well on the show notes page at thehowofbusiness.com in case you're listening where you can't write that down. John, thanks again for another great conversation, great insights as always. So thanks again for coming back on the show.
Love being with you, Henry. Always fun.
This is Henry Lopez. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The How of Business. My guest today again was John Humphrey. I release new episodes every Monday morning. You can find the show anywhere you listen to podcasts, including my YouTube channel, the How of Business YouTube channel, and the website, thehowofbusiness.com. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to The How of Business. For more information about our coaching programs, online courses, show notes pages, links, and other resources, please visit thehowofbusiness.com.